French Prime Minister Sebastien Lecornu has offered his resignation to Emmanuel Macron. That has been accepted by the president. That surprise news coming into us, as I say, around about 45 minutes ago. Up until then, we had been expecting a cabinet meeting, the first cabinet meeting since Sebastien Lecornu announced his new government around about 4 o'clock this afternoon. But obviously that's not happening now because the government has fallen before it even got to that stage. And all that was triggered, if you like, by Sebastien Lecornu announcing his new government last night with many of the same names as those who'd been in the cabinet underneath François Bayrou before him. A lot of accusations that basically he was just carrying on with exactly the same policies and exactly the same people in post. Well, I mentioned around about 10, 15 minutes ago that there's been already some reaction on the markets as well. And Bryan Quinn from our business desk is back with me here on set. Bryan, first of all, just bring us up to date with it. I mean, what's the latest that we're seeing?
Sure. We saw the CAC open down around 0.7% before that news broke. Now down roughly 2%. We see it here. If we can get that graphic up, it's down around 1.95% compared to some much milder falls on London and Frankfurt bourses. We'll get that probably later on.
Not a very white graphic. Yes, it was a surrendered graphic.
Exactly. Yes, the flag of surrender for the French stock market. It could be worse, though. It must be said. 1.9% for the CAC 40 in the middle. There is a significant drop, but not terribly precipitous. Where we are seeing some very precipitous drops are in the shares of French banks, as the country's finances now once again thrown into even more uncertainty. We're seeing the likes of BNP Paribas down nearly 4%. You've got Société Générale down nearly 5%. There's Crédit Agricole also down nearly 5%. It's behind me there. More than 5%. So those French banks obviously taking a big hit as that news breaks. Also, of course, the government's borrowing costs. This whole a lot of this political crisis is driven, of course, by France's debt crisis and how much the country owes. Its borrowing costs keep going up every time there's more political chaos. Every time that the country's credit gets downgraded, investors demand more to lend the country money. We're seeing bond yields versus the German benchmark spreads between the French 10-year bond and the German 10-year bond at their highest since the beginning of the year, at least, if not more. It's around nearly 0.9%. The French borrowing costs closing in on 3.6% for the bond yields there. So obviously, stock investors perhaps not necessarily accustomed, but already bracing for French political chaos. Maybe not quite as abruptly as we're seeing today, but the falls on the stock markets could be worse. So where we're seeing it really is in banking shares.
A lot of this reaction, would you say, Bryan, to Bruno Le Maire?
That is what a lot of the chatter is. In fact, on the financial scene there, Bruno Le Maire, of course, was Emmanuel Macron's finance minister for the first 7 years of his term. We look at the results. A lot of people blame him for France's current fiscal situation. We see the deficit projected for this year, 5.4%. Last year was at nearly 6%. That's twice the EU limit. National debt, 115.6% of GDP. Once again, nearly twice the EU limit. Just had a credit downgrade in September. There's more reviews coming at the end of this month and at the end of November. Almost certain to be downgraded again, especially after today's developments. But Bruno Le Maire obviously has a lot to do with that. He was working for Emmanuel Macron. These are Emmanuel Macron's policies as well. But you had twin kind of crises that really blew up the government debt. You had, of course, COVID and France's famous quoi qu'il en coûte, whatever it costs to prop up companies, prevent layoffs, save jobs. Fairly widely appreciated, you would probably imagine, by businesses and employees who are at risk of being laid off at the time. However, definitely added to the national debt. Then you had Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the massive spike in natural gas prices coming into Europe. The French government protected consumers from that. You saw huge raises in prices in the UK and Germany. French consumers definitely saw some, but not nearly to that level, and that was largely borne by government spending, which added to the debt. At the same time, you had Macron wanted tax cuts to try to boost business. investment growth. We had the ISF, the Impôt Solidaire, sort of fortune. There's just a wealth tax. The previous wealth tax that France had was eliminated. That took billions out of government revenues per year. There were other corporate tax cuts, also middle-class tax cuts. Macron was hoping to get revenues from things like the fuel tax that he had imposed, but that sparked the Yellow Vest movement, so that had to be taken back. So there's a lot of spending on the one hand and tax cuts with revenues that were expected to come in to make up that downfall that just didn't happen with leftists with this huge budget hole. Macron was hoping that growth would make up for that too, but we've seen very anemic growth in France, 1.1% last year. So obviously, those who saw Bruno Le Maire coming back to a very important cabinet post might have said, wait a minute, this is the guy who got us to where we are. Where is the change of course? And so you saw the Républicains in particular, really like having a crisis meeting and perhaps not about to support the government that they were about to be a part of. So it's probably a big reason why we're seeing Lecornu resign there.
You do wonder what was in Bruno Le Maire's head, don't you? Because only when he left the previous government, he said there's absolutely no way I'm going to go back into the government. And yet there he is back in the government, and potentially his being back in the government being one of the reasons why that government has now fallen.
Couldn't resist, I guess.
Exactly. Maybe that was the case. Thanks so much, Bryan Quinn, our business editor on France 24. What Bryan mentioned there